Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for Seek Power Always, that power within you to do your greater work in the world. I am so inspired to have one of my dear friends and just an amazing woman here, Kylie McConnell, who helps entrepreneurs that are secretly stressed or stuck to reboot their nervous system so that they can come alive, feel calm, and fully enjoy their success. Kylie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane. So good to be here.
Well, you and I were trained in very similar skills, and I love to see how you are bringing this into the entrepreneurial world. And it's just amazing when people don't know what they don't know. And so one of the things I would love for you to start talking about is about, it's interesting when you say secretly stressed. Like, are people not understanding that they're stressed and they're coming to awareness of that? Talk a little bit about that.
Oh, that's such a great question. It's actually more of the thing that we do as humans. And it's so funny. This has so many roots of seeking love, but it's what we do of wearing masks in life. And most entrepreneurs, creatives, leaders that I work with almost always mention that they'll feel like they're living double lives, like they're living two lives. So this one, front that they put on in person and what they think that people need to hear from them. And then this other life when they're home alone in the dark, and it's like this shadow life that they're living. So it's the people that you would never expect to be stressed, that look smiley and vibrant and they're benevolent and loving, but then they have this stress that's always running in the background.
Yes, I totally get this. I mean, I lived this when my own real undercover life with the police department and working undercover, because you had to be a different person. And I completely agree that this actually translates into entrepreneurs in particular, that, I like to say we actually have three lives, where it's like there's that public life that we show everyone. And then there is that private life that we only have maybe our close people maybe know a little bit about us, some of our family and friends. But that undercover life, that part that we don't want anyone to see, there may be some embarrassment and shame, that not only are we, acting in that way to maybe show up in a different way in our business, or hopefully people don't see any of our flaws or things that are happening. But don't you believe that there is some aspect of when we're doing that the more shadow aspects of ourselves, that goes into our tissues, right? This is where things start showing up in our body. It starts showing up in our emotions. All of a sudden you're great one day and then you're losing your crap the next day. Like, there's just all these swings that can happen when we're not fully in an alignment. And so you've really shifted this work, particularly over the last 10 years, to entrepreneurs. And you talk about them having a very special and important role in our life. So I'd love to really talk about why you're targeting the entrepreneurs and why they need this work so much.
Yeah, great. I love the great question. So entrepreneurs are these magical creatures that they have this gorgeous balance of creativity, desire to contribute. Like, there's something in the DNA of an entrepreneur that just wants to give, that wants to not be put in a box of doing a typical 9-to-5 job in a cubicle. Like, their creativity cannot handle that. So I feel like, it's so funny. Sometimes I refer to them as gushers. Do you remember these candies, gushers? They like have this gooey center, but then on the outside. And these are the entrepreneurs that I work with, where it's like they just innately in their DNA have this juiciness inside of them that is just waiting to explode into the world, but there's something that's stopping them, and that is the stress. It's the anxiety, it's the exhaustion. That when you're stressed, anxious, and exhausted as an entrepreneur, when you have something that you're here to give, like that in your bones that you're here to contribute, but you can't because you're exhausted or you're anxious, it gets put on the shelf. And when it gets put on the shelf until you can kind of get your stuff together, then that thing that you're here to contribute all of the people that you would be supporting and helping, and that they would be growing and their families would be growing, they're not getting that gift, you know?
Right.
So this is truly why I love working with leaders and entrepreneurs, because the ripple effect is immense.
Yes, absolutely. Well, who would have known, like, how so many years ago you and I were part of a starseed group of just galactic tools that so many people in the world have no idea that is out there, that can really just shift those things that people are feeling stuck, in their body, emotionally, spiritually. Just, there's so many different things. I would love for you to share about these special tools that we've have been blessed and to master, to be able to go out in the world and help people with. And you are definitely one of the master craftsmen of these tools. And I would just love for you to share more about this, because we definitely need to get more of this out into the world.
Amen. I could not agree more. I have so many people that they have been doing this personal development work for 5, 10 years. And when they find these two tools that I'll mention, they're like, this was the missing key, you know?
Yes.
So I love what you shared earlier about, basically you said something that inspired me to realize so many of the people that I work with are so intelligent. Again, these entrepreneurs, it's like that. I would just love to get a peek at their brains, because problem solving ability that they have and the creativity that they have, they're just super, super intelligent people. And what my experience is that the challenges that we have going on, that, like you said earlier, they show up in our tissues, they show up in our bodies.
Mhm.
There is this deep frustration that happens because these wonderful humans, they're so smart, but they can't figure out why they're still stuck, or why they're still stressed, or why that shadow life is still so prevalent. And my experience is because these are challenges or problems that can't just be solved with your mind. They
Yes.
really need to be shifted within the body. So the body is the physical representation of your subconscious. Some people even say that the body is the subconscious. So when we, when we stuff down an emotion, or when we don't want to process something, or we think, I don't have time to handle it now, it doesn't just go away. It doesn't get, fairyland where it just, disappears into the ethers. It gets stored in our body. So
Right, right.
things that I do is I share what I refer to as transformational bodywork. And this is, again, because the body is the physical representation of the subconscious. So those things that are stuck and blocked, they actually physically get stuck in our bodies within our meridians, which are our energy highways. And you can imagine these energy highways like hoses. So if you have a hose that has rocks and sticks and dirt and leaves in it, you don't get a flow of energy moving through. And what we experience as humans when we have that stuckness is frustration and irritability and exhaustion and anxiety and stress. And the challenge is that most people have had these stucknesses getting, pushed and pushed into their energy highways since we were kids. These are the people-pleasing tendencies and the martyrdom and the overextending yourself and saying yes to the things that you're really a no to, and not being fully expressed and not using your voice. Like, every time you do any single one of those things, it kinks your body. And so
Right. Well, and it's different for every person, right? So for one person, that rock and stick may get through, and for another one, that may actually cause it to lodge. So we never know what things that we're exposed to that are going to cause that kink.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that so much. And that's a really great point to bring up, because, some of the work, it specifically is regarding trauma. And trauma, from any trauma therapist will share that a trauma for one person is not a trauma for another person.
Yes.
Literally, trauma could be kids, laughing at you in school, or, something more severe with your parents. It's like there's a whole range. So I have never seen a body work as powerful as, and I mean, you know this, so many people in our community know this, where it's like people have done work for, again, a year, years, 5 years, a decade, and we can do a couple of sessions of this transformational body work, and it gets into that really deeply lodged stuff in the meridian highways, in the fascia, and it unlocks it, and what it releases is this energy and this freedom and this lightness. And one of the top things that I always hear is people say, I just feel more myself.
Yes. Yeah. It's like pulling out the static.
Yes. Pulling out all the noise so that what's left is you.
Yeah. So awesome. I just love this so much. And, you know, it allows our entrepreneurs to reboot themselves, to really come to a place where it's like, oh, this is the deeper version of myself. We hear people say, you know, be more of you, but how do you get to that place, and what that actually looks like? And, you know, I know that you have several tools where you really consciously create your life. You know, we talk about designing your life versus living by default and letting things happen. I'd love for you to share some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this, and I love that this is what you're all about, because I would say when some of these things clicked for me, life was never the same. It's like taking the red pill of sovereignty. So I would say one of the primary things that I do to create a life by design instead of default is just being super, super aware of the thoughts that I'm thinking. So the thoughts that we think are correlated with an emotion that we'll feel. So in like the most basic, simple sense, when I'm thinking a thought that isn't really in alignment or resonance with the fullness of who I am, with who I truly am, I don't feel good. It feels like there's contraction in the body. It feels dark. It feels dense. It feels heavy. When I think thoughts that are supportive and in harmony with truth, I feel light. I feel good. I feel, you know, free to express and be who I really am. So I would say that's a primary piece that I do, is the faster that I can catch myself, if I start going down a rabbit hole of thoughts that aren't serving me, I've just realized over the years, there's actually no good thing that comes from
Well, you know, there's a couple things that come to mind with this. I always talk about, like, you know, your mind is a bad neighborhood. Don't go in there alone. Make sure that you've got some good tools that have you really have that awareness. And I think it's so important what you're saying about being able to catch yourself sooner. Like when you come from that place of high consciousness and awareness, and you can notice and you start asking yourself better questions, because some of the thoughts that are coming in, we know that we are not our thoughts, although sometimes it can feel like it is. And so when we can actually be that observer and be able to actually look at those thoughts and see what's happening, we can then start going, you know, is this even me? Is this thought even a representation of me? So making those shifts can actually come quicker when we can actually, you know, come back into that alignment of who we are. So I love where you're really breaking down this conscious process of, it's not like, oh, thoughts are just happening, which they are, but how we're reacting to them, how it has the impact, and then noticing how it affects our emotions, how it affects your day, and just that ripple effect that it has. So I love that. Real good.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting what you brought up. So it's part of why I love the body work that we were just talking about, because I mean, this is science. This is Joe Dispenza. There's so much science behind the thoughts that we think create, again, literal chemical responses that we feel as feelings. And
Yes.
the more that we feel those feelings and we're in that hormonal soup, our brain then responds to our feelings and says, oh, we should think more of the thoughts that match these feelings. And then the more that we think those thoughts, the more that we'll feel those feelings. And so it's this feedback loop. And so because we have a feedback loop, and this is what I support my clients with too, is you get to choose, like, which feedback loop do you want to be on, the upward spiral one or the downward spiral one. But the body work that we were talking about, it's really lovely because it sounds so nice to say, like, oh, well, just watch your thoughts. And it's like, it's not that simple, especially if you're, you know, in some beginning chapters of, you know, becoming more aware of your own thoughts and feelings. But that body work that we were mentioning, I consider it a lot. It's like we have a backlog of thoughts and feelings and undigested, unprocessed emotions, thoughts, experiences. So when you're able to clear that backlog, it's like taking an Etch-a-Sketch and just shaking it up so you start with a blank slate, right? And then from that place, it's a lot easier to then catch yourself because you're not always tied to those past emotions that can feel really heavy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I know another thing that you do that's very conscious, where we are definitely in sync sisters with, is creating happy environments and the impacts that those things have. In fact, when I retired from the police department, my first online academy was From Clutter to Calm. And it was about being very, very intentional about your space. So I would love for you, one, to share about your space and how you talk about how the environment in your space creates an upward energy and how that actually impacts how you move about your day. And part of that is one of the questions that I also love to ask my guests, is that because environment is so important, we have different experiences in our bedroom versus our kitchen and our office. So I also want to know, what is your favorite room in your home and why?
I love this. Oh, that's such a fun question. So I'll actually start with that piece where I do somewhat follow Feng Shui in my home. So Feng Shui just allows for more supportive energy flow and cohesive flow. And there are certain, you know, spaces and rooms of your home that are more supportive to working, or more supportive to romance, or more supportive to creativity. And I actually love this particular area. So it has these gorgeous lights that I have all around my house. I don't know if you can see them up. They're like big
Yes,
bulb lights
beautiful.
around everywhere, and this burnt orange velvet fabric. I'm such a like sensual touchy person, so the velvet just pleasures me so much.
And within your colors, your color palette.
Yes, exactly. And like you see the flowers, and so I love this area, and I get the sunlight too, and yeah, it's a fun area. And you know, it's so funny because so again, with the back to the last question that you asked, the thought process is, I know that, again, if I'm thinking a thought that doesn't really serve me, it's not going to feel great. If I'm thinking a thought that does feel like it's supportive and serving me, it feels really good. Like, it's so simple. So the more kind of excuses or permission slips that I can have everywhere, the better. Because when I look at this plant, or when I look at those fun bulb lights, or all of the gold that I have around my house, because those are just my things, it feels good. And I consciously practice. And this is so fun. I actually share this with people. So you that are watching, this is one of the easiest tools that you can use or listening. Often people think, how do I get out of a kink? How do I stop getting stressed? And instead of going to the hardest, roughest, most friction place of your life and trying to shift that, because oftentimes those have a lot of momentum, right? One of the easiest things that we can do is actually look at and feel and just appreciate the things that are already going really well, like the things that are really easy to be with. So these plants that I probably have 20, 30 plants, and I can see about 20 of them right now. Every time I look at them, it's just so easy to love them. So in what I always say is milk it. Like, instead of just saying, oh, it's nice, it's a sunny day, great, like taking a moment, pausing, breathing. So maybe instead of 1 second, it's 3 to 5 seconds. And you're just milking that experience, and that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. So for me, the home is like as many permission slips you can give yourself to have experiences that you can just milk. Those are going to create more moments of joy and pleasure and connection and feel good. And our moments are what makes up our life, you know?
Yes. Oh, I love this so much. And what a great opportunity now where people are spending more time in their home than ever to take that opportunity to, one of the exercises I love doing with my clients is having them walk in every single room of their home, whether that's a big or small space, and to close their eyes in each room and see how does that room feel. And then when you open up your eyes to see what things are like drawing you in and make you happy and what things are taking your energy away, get rid of those things, girlfriends. Like if those things are in your space, they have no use for you.
Gosh, love that you shared that because, you know, sometimes we have things in our own life that we are so, uh, they've become so natural to us that we forget that we do them. So
Yes.
I traveled for about 5 years nonstop all over the world. And when you travel all over the world and you go to a country and you don't know if you're going to be there for a day or die there of old age, like you start getting really light with the things that you're carrying around because you're the one carrying them all the time. So I
Yes.
was a backpack with basically some superfoods and a few sarongs and my BioNTech sprays, and that's about what I had. And so you get really, I would say, almost say minimalist around what you truly love and what doesn't need to be around. And I've really
Yes.
that, even though I now have a gorgeous home in San Diego, carried that same mentality of if it doesn't bring joy or pleasure, or I absolutely love it when I look at it, it doesn't have a space in my life. And my belief is that, again, this is a representation, you know, as above, so below, as within, so without. So it's like, if we are able to declutter on the outside, that's going to be supportive to our internal state as well of, you know, thoughts and beliefs and ways of thinking or perspectives that we don't need to have anymore. It's easier to clear those out internally as well.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, I always love to share with our listeners just times where you have felt like disempowered, right? When you're on the journey, life happens. I know that you've shared a lot about traveling, being on the road for 5 years, a lot of things popping up. I had to like just put a smile, and I'll share as well when you talk about the moped, because that is just so reminds me of Greece in such a big way. I would just love for you to share just a little bit about you know, things that weren't working as well for you and how you moved through that to stand more in your power.
Yeah. So, you know, the story that comes to mind, it was actually the first day that I got to Greece. Um, I was traveling in a very free-spirited type of way, and long story short, ended up staying with a friend. It was a new friend, and I'll keep the details super brief and stick with the important parts, which is that I came home after my first wonderful day in Greece, trying baklava and all of these delicious things I'd been waiting for years to do, and come to the hotel that we were staying at together to find my bags at the front desk, and the manager with this just such a sad, solemn face. Me that this gentleman that I was staying with had requested that the maid take my bags out, basically kicking me out and changing the key. And it was past midnight. Nowhere else was open. They were out of rooms. And he was, this poor guy being the messenger of this, was so sorry, but there was really nothing else that could be done. And so I took my bag and I went and sat outside on the side of the street. And my initial response was one of just such obvious confusion, but just almost disbelief that an adult human could behave in such a manner that was so different than how I would choose to show up in life. And I remember feeling, you know, what am I going to do? Nowhere else was open. Again, it was my first day in Greece. My phone didn't have connection yet in Greece. Even the letters in Greece are different. So I couldn't even like read street signs. And this experience of such chaos and just such having the rug pulled out from under me. And so I realized at first I was just in the experience. It was all of the gunk was rising up in my body, and just, again, the anger, the frustration, the disbelief, the sadness, the confusion, the not knowing what was going to happen, right? Doubt, fear, etc. And then something clicked, and I realized I caught myself. I realized that I was going down that rabbit hole of, again, that downward spiral of nothing good really comes from this. And so when that clicked, I realized, okay, I've already had so much built up in my body. So what needs to happen is that needs to move through me. So I cried and I just let it go. I was like, I'm not holding this back, and just let it stream for a good 30 seconds to a minute. And then I thought, okay, well, what comes next? And I realized the one thing that I had access to, which we always have access to, is our breath and God. So I took some deep breaths and I prayed. And of course, on the side of the street in Greece at night, not knowing anyone, like, who knows what would happen. But literally, I would say probably within 20 seconds of that prayer, I heard this whistling coming down the street of someone who I knew the moment that I heard that whistling, and he was kicking this soccer ball. I was like, this is my prayer answered. And he saw me, clearly saw that I was upset, and asked me a question. And literally, it was an exchange of 1 to 2 sentences. And he was like, he pointed, he said, my house is literally right here. I have an extra, room. Come stay here. You can figure it all out tomorrow. And I'm like, how does it get any better than that? But from totally disempowered, feeling hopeless, helpless, to, realizing I had options.
Yeah, I love that so much. And the distinction between that was that you checked in. I mean, you have such a strong connection with God, and being able to listen to what was in alignment for you. Like, for another person who could have just been like, oh, I'll sleep at this person's house, that could have been a place of danger. Like, that could have not been an alignment for them. But when you checked in with yourself and you were like, okay, this is my answered prayer, that is such a huge distinction of how we trust ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Of knowing when the messages are for us versus them being a push. I talk a little bit too about, where we're in fear and where we're being fierce and pushing through things. And I love the distinction that you talk about is, you don't want to have a fierceness where you're being pushed, but how are things being conspired where all things around you are actually supporting you to actually move in the direction that you are in. And so I think this is such an empowering stance of trusting yourself, listening to yourself, and knowing from that place of alignment that you're making the best choices for yourself. So I love that for you.
Woo! Amen, Diane. Oh my goodness. I love to use the word listening. It's probably one of my favorite words, because, and it goes so much into everything that we've spoken about, the body work to clear the cache of your subconscious. Even the micronutrients that we haven't really touched on, but that helps to still the nervous system so that you can listen even better. It really all comes back to that space of intuition and listening of what's right for you, because it's you're unique, and it's always going to be for you.
Absolutely. I love it so much. And boy, we can talk all day about this, especially about let's actually take a moment before we do wrap up to talk about the micronutrients, because that is such a key ingredient into the puzzle of being more of who you are. And to, I love you talk about clearing the cache of your consciousness. That's just so awesome and juicy, that whole thing. But yeah, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the micronutrients.
Absolutely. So I found these micronutrients. They're called a micronutrient technology probably 8 years ago now. And I was doing all the things that are supportive for human bodies: the juicing, the yoga, the meditation, the breath work, the journaling, the forgiveness work, the trauma release work, the childhood work, all of it. I mean, it was my life, just morning to night. And once I found these micronutrients, I realized that there was a next level available to me that I quite literally believe I never would have been able to access just by doing all of those really, really wonderful things. And the reason for this, and I'll do my best to keep this brief and not nerd out too hardcore, but if you're listening and want to know more, I'm so happy to share. But basically, the one thing that really interests me about it is something called behavioral epigenetics. So our epigenetics are how our genes are expressed and how certain genes get shut off through environment. So even things like stress and trauma can actually shift how our genes are expressed. And then very physical components of daily drugs like sugar, alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, chocolate, pharmaceutical drugs, recreational drugs. So all of these things are going to shift our genetic expression. And what that means is your body, which is this miraculous machine that in its fullest form of health would be producing things like dopamine to help you feel, naturally energized and vital, and serotonin to feel calm and get good sleep, GABA, which is like the body's natural Valium to just feel really good. I could go on, melatonin, all of these things. So when our body is not producing these hormones and neurotransmitters, that's when we feel anxious, stressed, exhausted. I personally had an eating addiction because my genes were working against me instead of for me. It can show up, addictions. I work with so many people with addictions. That is because we're not producing these things internally that we should be. So I've searched the planet again for about a decade for other things like this that support with the fullest human expression, and I've never found anything else that even holds a light to this micronutrient technology, because what it works to do is all of those genes that have been silenced, again, whether it's through your own life or through your lineage. So if your great-grandfather had silenced genes, he passes them along to your grandfather and then to your father, and then it gets passed along to you with those genes already silenced, which means we just don't have the chance to produce those things. It's why we see stress and anxiety and people not sleeping and addictions just running rampant these days, because we're not producing that internally. So what this micronutrient does in a nutshell, amongst many other things, but one of the primary things that it does is it supports in that DNA getting demethylated, which means that it's unsilenced, and you get that genetic expression, you get that DNA turned back on in a sense, so that you're producing those things internally, those hormones and neurotransmitters that help you feel calm, that help you feel clear, that help you have clean, stable, consistent energy, that help you get out of the bed in the morning feeling excited and eager to go on through the day and have great problem solving skills and stay focused. These are all biochemical responses that, because of this micronutrient technology, we get to turn back on in people that, and I share this through, clients that I work with one-on-one, and we do this for a week at the retreat when we do our Enlivened Entrepreneur retreats. And the magic of this work. It's profound.
Absolutely. Definitely. Well, thank you so much, because I think it's helpful to just have some background with it. I mean, this is something, Kylie and I have been trained, hours, days, weeks, years on, and but it can change your life in a moment, right?
Yeah.
And there's just different levels of understanding it. And so definitely people are going to want to hear more about it, learn more about it. When you guys, whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this on, you can put in the comments, and any questions that you have around this, and make sure that you guys tag either Kylie or myself, and we're happy to tell you more about it, tell you how to get it, all of those kind of things. So Kylie, you and I could be talking all afternoon about these yummy, delicious topics, and these just wonderful ways of being more in alignment. And I know that people are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they do that?
Yes, I would love that. So I would say two ways. One of them is going to be through Facebook. If you have Facebook and want to reach out, you can just search Kylie McConnell and post on my wall. Just follow the things that I share. I always love receiving your messages. So if you want to send me a private message, I'd be happy to hear. Or you could go to my site is juicytransformations.com. And there's even an opportunity to book a call on there, completely complimentary call. I call it a Juicy Jumpstart. And it's about 60 to 90 minutes of a deep dive with you to get clear on where you are, what you want, what's in the way of that. And if I can support you on that journey, I will do anything I can to do so.
I love it. Love it so much. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. It's been such a pleasure to connect with you.
You as well, love. Thank you so much. It was super fun.
You got it. And to our listeners out there, thank you so much for being here. You know, we can't do this without you. Your most precious resource is your time, and we so appreciate you being here. Again, if you have any questions or comments, make sure that you tag both Kylie and myself. We're happy to answer any of those that you have. Please listen to several of the episodes and comment and share and get it out there. This is how we get positive messages out in the world. You're part of that community and you help us do that. So please jump in, please share, be part of the message that gets it out there. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.